James.
Right.
Now, we experienced a first on the weekend, a first of potentially many.
Yeah. I think actually a big moment in the US-China trade war, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. It happened right in front of our eyes. As we were wont to do, the boys were watching a bit of blood sport. As we were watching the UFC in a pub, not our standard pub, actually, due to satellite issues. We won't get into that. But there was, in particular, there was one fight, Sean O'Malley from the United States versus Song Yadong of China. And at multiple points, just before and during the fight, a CCP chant went up.
Exactly. Filling the room of the pub where they were broadcasting the UFC. Now, we're not going to call out the venue, but we will say it was somewhere in Sydney's inner west. Mm-hmm. You could have assumed that. And the room was aflame with people chanting CCP, CCP, CCP.
Yeah, to the tune of USA, USA. I would hazard to guess these were not Chinese-born people.
No.
Most of them are also possibly both sexes and genders.
Yeah, it was
predominantly female.
I think you're probably right. I think it was probably a bit of an even split. It was your average group of anyone that you would see at a pub in Sydney's inner west. You know, I think it was a representative slice.
Yeah,
demographically, gender-wise, ethnically, and the room was alight with CCP chants. Now, we're not calling the trend. We're just saying this is an interesting data point.
It's an interesting data point, possibly the first of many. I mean, people may look back on this episode, people in 5 years' time might be like going through the archives and they'd say, why was that unusual? That's just every day. In fact, it's illegal not to do that now.
It's illegal not to do that in the Chinese protectorate of Australia.
Exactly, in the autonomous region, autonomous economic region of Australia.
But funnily enough, we will get a little bit into the issue of China in this episode, among other things, because we are talking about a very highly requested topic, actually. There's been a few people that have asked for it. I got a LinkedIn message asking for it, and a handful of other people. Someone brought it up on the Discord. I've had people in real life say that we should touch on this one, and we haven't done it as yet. But it is about Airwallex, who have been in the news repeatedly of late, and not always for the best of reasons. In fact, I would say exclusively for bad reasons. And you may be wondering, what on earth is Airwallex? Now, they're a payments company. You could argue they are Australian.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's how it's presented.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially now, it's being sort of represented as a true blue Australian company. But, you know, as is the case with many of these like weird payments companies, and there's a payments company, which is what we'll get into. It was founded in Melbourne back in 2015 by Jack Zhang, Lucy Liu, a few other founders in Melbourne. But it is now a sort of international entity that does business in Singapore, does business in mainland China, is opening an office in San Francisco. It does still have some Melbourne staff, but it's one of those things where it's like, can you still describe it as an Australian company? Certainly founded in Australia, but you know, especially once you have these weird global entities that facilitate payments, it all starts getting a little bit strange.
I mean, payments in general, right? Like, there's so many in the financial world, let alone startup plus financial, that end up in Cayman Islands and all kinds of places. It's, you know, everyone knows there's something about payments.
In the same way, it's like, would you call Stripe? Some people try to say Stripe is like an Irish company. It's like, not
Absolutely
really.
Not.
Although, to be fair, there's a lot of companies that you could say are technically Irish.
That's true.
By virtue of where their European headquarters are, Apple, etc. Although slightly less now. They still do it, but I don't think that tax strategy is quite as advantageous these days.
Well, Ireland was getting in trouble from the EU, etc. But anyway, that's not what we're getting into.
We're not talking about Hibernia. We're talking about Airwallex. And the reason we're bringing it up, as I said, there's been some controversies of late. The most recent one is that they are being investigated by AUSTRAC, which is Australia's anti-money laundering watchdog, essentially.
Should we briefly give a little bit more detail about exactly what they do?
Yeah, I think so.
I can just talk from my experience.
Yeah.
Having worked at a bunch of companies, in particular, if you're a business and you want to hold money on customers' behalf in an account. So, for example, you might be an investment platform. This is the experience that I've had. And as a customer, I want to put some money into an account that I then use to invest in other things.
Yep.
The way to do that typically is to use someone like Airwallex, and they're basically the custodians. They're the ones who actually run the accounts, and you're just tapping their API to integrate into your service. So when I deposit 100 grand, 50 grand, whatever, into investment platform, it's actually going to an Airwallex wallet. It's just kind of presented as on the platform, which can then be accessed, and the company can kind of still move that money around. That kind of thing.
So it started as a platform for facilitating cross-border payments. That was basically the initial problem that it was solving. So the whole idea is like, if you're a small or medium enterprise, which is who they were targeting initially, let's say you are a cafe in Melbourne or like a retailer in Melbourne that sells coffee beans that they obtain from some European supplier, right? Doing cross-border payments is actually just really, really annoying.
Yeah.
And the basic way that it used to be done is you facilitate the payment through your bank or through some sort of bank service. It goes through like 5 different FX touch points or foreign exchange touch points and custodians, and you end up paying fees on every one of those. It's just really annoying, right? Airwallex was basically like a digital solution. And the whole idea was, you can have a unified wallet that has Australian dollars, it has British pounds, US dollars. Yeah, exactly.
Same as like Wise or TransferWise, right?
Exactly.
A bunch of different accounts. And you can give people like your Australian account for AUD or like your US dollar account with like Swift codes and that kind of things for USDs, etc.
Exactly. Just on like a technical level, without getting too deep into it, the whole idea is that your account is deducted X amount in Australian dollars. Let's talk about this coffee supplier. The European coffee supplier is credited in euros, and then in the middle, there's this massive jumble of like Forex stuff that Airwallex is doing to get the best spread and prices and all this sort of stuff. They're doing all that annoying hard stuff and trying to like minimize the amount that they're paying and keeping fees extremely low. As with all fintechs, it's like a bit of arbitrage. Banks have made this really, really complicated. Regulation has made this really, really complicated, and this is what we're going to get into. As with a lot of fintechs, a lot of what they're solving for is the fact that like they are as minimally regulated as they can possibly be, and they reap the benefits of that. And then you, as the customer, get low-cost Forex payments. Now, once they establish that, they've expanded into everything else. Like they do spend management for companies. They do what you were just talking about before, is like the way that you were exposed to them. They've become almost kind of like a little Stripe competitor in certain areas, right? They do payments rails. They do all sorts of different stuff. Like an alternative payment system for the world, with the goal of you can move money anywhere relatively frictionlessly. Now, when you hear that and you go, move money everywhere relatively frictionlessly, does that not create issues? And the answer to that is yes, repeatedly over many, many years. The reason they've been in the news recently, there's a couple of things. The first is they're extremely highly valued. They're not in, the Stripe realm, but their Series G was in December 2025. They raised $330 million at a valuation of $8 billion. That's a pretty highly valued fintech. It's not in the realm of something like Stripe, which is like worth $100 billion. But, not bad. And for something that is ostensibly Australian by some connection, that's pretty solid.
We'll take our unicorns and we can get them.
Yeah, we'll take them. We'll take them, even if they're Singaporean Chinese now.
Yeah, same as like Pavlova or whatever was invented in New Zealand and we claim it. It was plenty. Russell Crowe,
Russell Crowe, we took him. It's all good. Sometimes, yeah, exactly. Except it did actually start here until the Singaporeans stole it from us. So them raising money has been a story of the past little while, them being valued so highly. But there's 2 stories that they've hit it really hard. The most recent story from the end of last week, they are under investigation by AUSTRAC, which is Australia's anti-money laundering regulator and watchdog. And some quotes were given to the AFR, which basically said they are particularly worried about Airwallex being used to facilitate money laundering, and particularly around like child sexual exploitation stuff, which is like a classic thing that payments gets routed towards if you don't have unbelievably strong safeguards to prevent against that. With the general vibe that's been put out there that Airwallex does not have, has historically not had, very, very strong protections around anti-money laundering, which comes back to what we were just talking about before, which is when you're selling it as like frictionless payments that are low cost and no drama, you can move money across borders as easily as possible.
Yeah, and easy to spin up.
Inevitably, that's going to be used for this kind of stuff.
Well, this is a classic, right? It's like a lot of the, and don't get me wrong, I quite enjoy my neobanks myself. I'm a big user of Wise, as I've said. I've dealt with Airwallex in the past in the business context, and it was very easy and very quick to onboard and get in there, even in a fairly enterprise setting. But as you say, it's like a lot of the frictions that have been built into the traditional system are like kind of evolved over time, and to the point where, yes, don't get me wrong, it's a real pain in the ass to set up a business account with like a bricks and mortar bank, going in person, showing ID or whatever. Then obviously part of the benefit, and this is like the classic disruption tale or whatever, it's like, wow, it's so annoying that you have to go into a bank in person with your passport and your ID and prove your ID and like sit down and talk to someone about what your business is in order to open up a card. That's really annoying. There must be a better way. Well, we'll make it frictionless. And then obviously all of a sudden it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And even with Wise, which as I said, I've used a bunch, which is not Airwallex, but basically exactly the same. Sorry, people might quibble with that, but it's very similar.
Yep. Just as an example in terms of anti-money laundering, know your customer, all that kind of stuff with the regular banks. If you look at, back in 2020, Westpac, which is one of Australia's big four banks, got pinged for anti-money laundering compliance failures, and they were fined $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
Which was, I believe, the biggest fine in Australian corporate history. Again, these are from like incredibly tightly watched industries. Even the most like libertarian governments tend to have a pretty strong interest in like preventing money laundering from its major financial institutions.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to do.
Yeah. It's hard to do. And also like the reason why so many of the banks have like all this in-person stuff is I've seen it like with Wise, it's like, okay, let's automate that. Let's try and take as many humans out of that process as possible so it's frictionless to open up these accounts. So then it's obviously they start implementing, nowadays when there's a bunch of websites when you're like verifying your identity, you like have to scan a passport and it checks whether it's like fake or not, and then you have to like show your face and turn your head around in circles and that kind of thing.
Yep.
They implement that kind of stuff. They check on business databases, this, that, and the other. But I've had multiple times on Wise, just one of my accounts just frozen.
Yeah,
it's just like frozen and says we need more. We need more details. We need your like company constitution or something like that. And you'll send it through and you'll just like be waiting for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then, oh, okay, it's been unfrozen. Because it's like this whole kind of, obviously your account gets flagged by some automation, but like that doesn't happen often with like normal banks. Like how often does like your full account be frozen? You can't transfer in and out. You can't do anything.
Yep.
That's happened to me with Wise, I reckon, on 4 separate occasions.
Yep, totally.
And it's because of the flip side. It's like in order to make things frictionless, you end up then with these like situations where actually it's like terrible. It's like extreme friction when you can't use the product and it has your money. Like that's a really annoying and bad feeling when you're like,
totally, that's
my money and it's frozen.
Yeah. And it's not like a fully like crypto adjacent industry, although there's some overlap in some of these companies, these payments processors and stable coins or whatever. But there is this vibe of, a lot of these are very new companies, like they're not super tested. They're like 10 years old, 15 years old, newer than that. And, it's a space where, as you said, there are more restrictions on this stuff now, but you can spin up these accounts relatively easily and frictionlessly. And then when they turn the evil eye of their compliance departments on you and go, oh shit, we actually need more because we don't know who you are, or like we're not confident in the KYC processes we did with you. Yeah, your money's locked up. As you say, unless you're doing shady stuff, that's generally not going to happen to you with a traditional financial institution, except I know there's been lots of controversy around like accounts linked to crypto trading and accounts linked to like right-wing people. I mean, that's a bit like debanking.
Debunking. Debunking. Yeah.
Debunking is a big narrative over there. But as a general rule, it's a lot less Wild West. Because there's a massive number of use cases which are wrapped around, God, it would be way better if I could just do this cheaper and faster, pay someone, receive some money, whatever. I was just reading a report that this sort of like weird collection of fintechs and global remitters like Airwallex now process about $1 trillion US per year as a collective. It's a fair bit of money to be ping-ponging around every year.
Yeah.
And in 2024, they all received a collection of fines totaling about $2.5 billion in 2024 for anti-money laundering stuff. So there's a bit of action in that space.
We should probably be clear with what that is. That's people illegally moving money in and out of countries, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Typically, or not necessarily in and out of countries, or just like washing dirty money, be it like drug dealers or, as you say, child porn or whatever, like moving money around that's not on the books.
Yeah. And one big trend that like all the regulators hate is this whole idea of like money mule accounts, people spinning up accounts, potentially like legitimately. There was a story I heard the other day from someone that apparently one of the problems that Australia's regulators now is that like criminal organisations will go to like O-Weeks and be like, hey, if you set up an account, we're just going to like move a certain amount of money through it per week, and then we'll pay you, a uni student, like $400 a month to just let us do that with your account, which, I
mean, it's a great deal.
Doing it at O-Week is just so red hot. Just that's your introduction to university. But like this whole idea of like mule accounts, very hard for you to do at a major bank, but they have huge fraud and compliance teams. Obviously, there have been like gaps. Remember that whole thing when people were using like the cardless cash on Combank ATMs, I believe it was, to like fund ISIS?
Yeah, I do remember that. Some of that.
Yeah. That was a big scandal during the ISIS days. So stuff like that happens, but like it's these weird fintechs where a lot of this stuff is happening. And I think part of the problem as well, and this loops us back to Airwallex, and one of the reasons they've gotten a lot of coverage is that they seem to have a very, very intense ultra growth culture where it's like we must expand at all costs. We are a hyper growth business. That doesn't necessarily align at all times with the kind of stringent anti-money laundering controls that you would hope for from a major financial.
Well, again, like there is some friction built into the system for a reason. I say all this, and I was just saying like Wise has frozen my money a bunch of times. I like Wise. Like I actually really I really enjoy it as an experience. The app is great,
Yeah, we use it. Like it's good. The cards are good.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to spin up cards and the features, are great. So it's like I do like that aspect of it, and I do like not having to go into the bank. On Wise, you can literally spin up a credit card, a digital version, on the spot, make one purchase with it, get rid of it. So you're never using that card again.
Yeah.
And so if you're on whatever, like basically any website that forces me to enter a credit card and not use Apple Pay or Google Pay, I'll probably do that if it's not like a major big box retailer or whatever. Features like that are great, but it's like you can also feel like
I could be using this insanely criminally, right? Like,
exactly.
No, exactly. I'm the same whenever I open the Wise app and I look at like use it for down around stuff. As you say, you can just whip up a card immediately, add it to Apple Pay, use it to buy something. And you're right, part of it you're like, this is sick, this is so good. But then you also think, I totally get why the Commonwealth Bank doesn't let me do that. You can't just open the CBA app and just whip up a digital card, spend it on one thing and go. Because and it comes back to the Airwallex thing. These are hyper-growth businesses that need to grow super hard. They're VC-backed, raising a ton of money. They need to expand, get new customers. They're incentivized to get new customers to compete with the banks, which are giant, often hundreds of years old institutions with tons of capital. And you're like, there's no way there's not a shitload of stuff falling through the cracks here. Even if you have an absolute gun anti-fraud team, cyber team, whatever. Yeah. There's just no way, because criminals are smart. They're using it for all sorts of funky stuff. Yeah. And the less friction there is, the more they're going to be able to do with that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, previously I've used traditional banks because like typically, you don't have to nowadays, but you've kind of almost have to have a traditional bank if you're like a proper business. Like
totally.
Especially if you've got point of sale and that kind of thing.
This is a proper business, but down around is a proper business.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, like, as in if you're like selling retail, CPG,
widgets
whatever.
And so on.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to go in person. And to make major changes to accounts, you have to go in person. That's frigging annoying, but, that's why they have them, right?
That's why they have them. So that's the one side of it, and this is what Airwallex has gotten in trouble for in the past. At Capital Brief, we've reported a few times. We did some reporting over the past couple months that basically said that, people who are associated with the company early on and around it said that, especially in the early era, although they all were at pains to say it's gotten a lot better, but especially in the early era, there was just like money was flying around everywhere. It was sometimes hard to like really get a handle on this KYC stuff. And I think that's just built into the business model to a certain extent. But the other big story that happened a little bit earlier, this is when people first started telling us to do an Airwallex episode, was when they were accused this is sort of parallel, but not quite the same issue, of being a backdoor for American data into China. This all stemmed from Keith Rabois, who's a Founders Fund guy, an investor in Stripe, which people have pointed out as one of the reasons why he went on this tear on X. And he basically kicked off this firestorm of criticism by saying, hey, most of Airwallex's software engineers are actually in China. Most of the people that work on the product are in China. It is a way for the Chinese authorities, essentially, to have backdoor access into all the different startups and businesses in America that use Airwallex. Now, obviously, they rejected that characterization pretty strongly. You know, they accept the fact that they have a bunch of software engineers and product people in mainland China, but they insist that the data does not live in mainland China. But that was the other side of it as well, which comes back to this like weird, again, it goes back to the TikTok thing, the national security law, like what does the Chinese government have access to and not have access to? Plus the general just like US-China tech war.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that payments is just like now another frontier in that. But yeah, little old Airwallex, a Melbourne company.
Yeah. Getting themselves tied up in some, risky business.
Yes.
Well, allegedly.
Allegedly.
I will say a phrase that you just said, I've realized this is something you don't want. If you're a business or a founder, that like now I feel like it's a real bearish sign of it's like heaps of people keep requesting that we talk about them on Down Round. Like that's rarely a good sign. Like it's not normally like, oh, this startup's popping. Like they look like they're doing great. Like the founders look like weapons. Like you guys should talk about them on Down Round. We don't get that much.
We don't really get that. Most of our listeners are very hateful people, and they want to see your boy dragged down. In this case, Jack Zhang, who is an interesting dude.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, we've talked about it all the time, like, you know, China's producing 300,000 friggin' AI PhDs a year and this, that, and the other. Like, they've got obviously a bunch of weapon developers. And, you know, in AI, we've talked about it a bunch. It's like the majority of senior AI developers and researchers seem to be Chinese. They obviously know what they're doing. So, like, there's heaps of Chinese developers. And then you've got this, like, situation where obviously America's like, oh, no, the Chinese.
Yeah.
They're like, and people are chanting in pubs in Sydney, CCP, what do we do to stop them? There was a story, this is now a few months old, if not 6 months old. I don't know if you caught it last year. So, like, when you have to deal with, like, national public sectors or whatever, departments or whatever who are of national importance, like national security, there's like certain rules over who can and can't work on the software, probably on Azure or whatever it is, or you know, maybe it's like CRM. Anyway, so Microsoft, this came out because they were advertising for the role, I believe, is how it came out. So basically what they were doing is they were employing Americans who are non-technical. You did not have to be technical for the role in order to physically like move mouse and click buttons, but it was a Chinese team of developers who just would have to tell Americans to sit there and like move their, now click on this, who are like sharing their screen or whatever. It's like, now click on this, now move this, yep, delete that, here's some code, copy this, paste that, in order to like get around the security that they'd signed up to.
Amazing.
This came out last year. Yeah. Yep. Amazing stuff. And I mean, it was a bad look for Microsoft. I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
Because it was seemingly signed off on and they were like, yeah, we know. And then apparently it's actually quite common that there's these kind of intermediary agencies who are basically just like clicking the buttons and pressing the code, who are potentially don't even know what they're doing, but in order to get around a bunch of these regulations. Because there's heaps of companies and heaps of American companies and whatnot will be like, it has to be Americans or it has to be from these safe countries that are working on it. That's not really possible a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Just another thing to consider.
No, it is. Absolutely. Airwallex has also gotten in trouble at various points with the Chinese authorities as well. While Hong Kong particularly, they froze $18 million in Airwallex accounts because 2 accounts, and this is fun, you look at this and you're like, I can see these being businesses that involve in some untoward stuff. Rongtong Sihai Import and Export Trading Co. and Zongliang Trading Co. receiving funds through Airwallex, which had been routed from a Uruguayan company called Cyclus that had allegedly been defrauded. So again, this just comes down to payments.
Payments, man.
This is really what the payment. Every time you read about something weird in payments, it's that. It's like weird Latin American companies routing through some sort of like Caribbean domiciled business into some weird Chinese import-export business. And then there's a remitter somewhere involved. And in that case, it was Airwallex. And Airwallex did say, we're just a third-party remitter that did KYC. But yeah, like a Capital Briefly also reported recently that when Airwallex moved to Singapore back in 2023 for their HQ, they identified that it was unable to quarantine access to existing customer data from China. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't stop the Chinese office from accessing data, which again, I think just speaks to two things. One, payments hard.
Yes. So why would you get into payments?
Well, I do want to stress that, but I think we've said it on Down Around before. I get it. It has like a mystique and attraction to it because you're like...
Yeah. Your total addressable market is every single piece of currency that exchanges hands all over the world. I do get that.
7 billion people.
The entire global economy?
Yeah, literally everyone on Earth is, except for like a newborn baby, is doing like currency transactions every day. And what if you could clip the ticket on some of that? It's an amazing, it's like we don't even have to like do anything. We just have to like have basically some VATs where money goes in and then goes out. And then we can whack all sorts of cool stuff on there, like cards and spend control and AI analysis and all sorts of shit. But at the end of the day, we're just the guy in the middle taking the envelope of money and giving it to someone else.
Yeah, how hard can it be?
How hard can that be? Turns out the hardest thing imaginable. Literally the hardest thing imaginable. To the point that like Stripe is obviously a crazy company, $100 billion valuation or whatever, still hasn't IPO'd. But they are constantly running into problems.
Yeah.
You have to deal with the laws of every country, especially when you get to a certain scale and you can't just be like a Wild West cowboy anymore. Like you're being chased down by their financial regulators. You're being, forced to conform to global standards, whatever. You got this mind-numbing array of like local regulation, international standards bodies. So there's that. Plus just like you need to have so many people to like mediate disputes. That's basically your job at the end of the day, is like disputes.
As well as like you're dealing with the thing that people basically care about most.
Yeah, everything is an abstraction of that. How much stuff do I have? It's
kind of the last place in the world you can have a bug, right? Like software is so buggy. Like you just can't have a bug when it comes to money. Like that's terrible. If that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that maybe that's the Fermi paradox. It's like obviously if other alien life exists, like why haven't we met them? Maybe it's because every single other civilization invented money and then at some point had some kind of glitch that just destroyed their global economy and made everyone starve to death. Yep. Because like inevitably something will go wrong when we make this shit too smart. They get to a point like they got Stripe 2.
Yep.
And Airwallex 2, like they're an advanced civilization.
Sure. Yep.
And then someone just accidentally like misplaces a dot somewhere and then the whole entire thing goes boom. Everything shuts down. No money can move anywhere. Or they flood the market with money. We have hyperinflation because someone accidentally releases a trillion.
Yep.
What's a big number? Googleplex dollars.
Wow. I love a Googleplex dollars. Imagine that. I would spend it very judiciously. I would not be
either that, or someone finally, some enterprising individual finally brings like the asteroid made of gold down to their planet.
Yeah, that's literally
the diamond asteroid.
That's the great filter. The great filter is like they get the asteroid made of gold and experience like Weimar hyperinflation and everyone dies. That's how it goes, and that's what Airwallex is trying to do. Yeah, exactly. It's just a nasty, horrible business, and it does. It reminds you exactly what we just said. Sometimes the friction is there for a reason. I'm not even saying this in a moralizing way of being like, guys, the rules are there for a reason. I'm saying it more in the sense that like it's the accumulation of lessons, hard lessons, over the course of like 800 years.
Well, yeah.
Since they invented like dual entry bookkeeping.
Well, yeah, but it just is what it is. And don't get me wrong, as I said, I do still think it's better, but like,
yeah,
I mean, when credit cards came out, they were banger, like that was crazy that you could just do that. You didn't have to use checks or whatever. When checks came out, they were crazy, and then things slow down and they kind of, it gets harder and worse and whatnot. And then someone comes along and is like, I've got an even better thing. And then it's like, oh shit, like they have to slow down.
Yeah.
And they reinvent. But this happens in tech all the time. You do a way better version of the old thing and then just end up as being the old thing, inevitably. Because once you get to a certain scale, you just have to be the old thing. It's like, it turns out I get why they have in-person meetings and, you have to actually speak to a person on the phone and tell them what your business is before you open up a business account and what your inventory is and whatnot. Like, it's like, oh, okay, I see why they force you to do that now. And then you just end up being them.
Totally. It's the same core thesis as to why we're not all using cryptocurrency and stuff, at least not in the way that the maxis used to talk about when they were all like, the future is self-custody. You shouldn't entrust your money to banks. You should have full ultimate sovereignty over your assets. And it's like, well, that's potentially good for a certain kind of person who has an extreme amount of agency and is willing to like dedicate their life to making sure that remains true, but like vast majority.
But it turns out even for like the vast majority of people who think they're that person, actually they're not that person.
Because at the end of the day, someone wants to be able to call someone up and scream at them and be like, I didn't order this. Like, or this was an illegitimate transaction, reverse it, or I forgot my password, or whatever. Society is like based around the fact that most people are like that and just like want to pass responsibility for like stuff that is extremely cognitively challenging. We live in a complicated world, folks, and as much of it as you can pass on to some system or other
don't
person,
take on responsibility. Are you stupid?
Take on responsibility to exactly, to the point where it's like you have to be the one to tell your starving kids, like, I'm sorry, I lost the key phrase to my Bitcoin drive. It's gone, and now we have no money. Anyway, I mean, I guess that's the problem with that. The main thing is that to walk away from this episode, cross-border remit has turned into like this big general lumpy payments thing. Maybe it's Australian, maybe not. They've historically had a lot of issues or concerns or investigations and weird banking relationships break down over their sort of anti-money laundering and know your customer controls and being able to...
Am I right in saying there's also been a fair bit of tweeting historically?
Yeah.
Or a little bit?
There's been a bit. I mean, at the moment, Jack Zhang, I'm going to bring this up because I thought this was quite amusing. So he started posting a lot on LinkedIn, at least, because they're mounting a real PR campaign at the moment, obviously, because they've had a lot of hits recently. Part of that is one of the things they're doing is they're suing the 9 newspapers, as I mentioned, over publishing stuff that was based on leaked documents, which they say is illegitimate. Unfortunately, that is a bit, to a certain extent, that's what journalism is. Publishing stuff from leaked documents. So there's that.
Okay, Julian Assange.
Sorry, very true, very true. But Jack Zhang has gotten on LinkedIn to do lots of posts, and his posts on LinkedIn are very obviously generated with ChatGPT. So he's done here's his post. Truth has become harder to see nowadays, not because there's less information, but because there's been too much narrative from people with their own interest. And then for builders and leaders, this matters.
That's me.
Yeah. And at the
speaking,
it's the last 2 sentences that really got me. Truth doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be accurate. Over time, facts compound. Narratives fade. That to me that's got a real GPT 5.2 stink about it.
Yeah. The real case closed.
Yeah. This is how narratives drift. Context gets stripped away, scope gets inflated, and nuance disappears. Good decisions don't come from headlines or hearsay. They come from first principles, primary sources, and direct context. The discipline is simple but hard. That's completely meaningless, and I think you've just got that straight out of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. Anyway, so keep an eye on Airwallex. I think it's going to be an interesting story, and I think it's the fact that they are stuck in this weird money laundering, AusTrack, money mule account stuff. So that's on the one side, not saying guilty, not guilty, but that's going on. Plus the fact they're getting sucked into this US culture war against China. Not a great place to be when they've been in IPO chatter for a number of years, have just sort of relocated, quote unquote, to San Francisco. There's a bit going on, but that's your Airwallex breakdown, folks.
Good luck to them. So next episode, we're going to talk maybe a bit about Apple's new AI chat app. We'll maybe explain what Claude Bot is.
Which has just been renamed.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, it got renamed about 30 minutes ago.
Oh,
Subscribe to Down Round Premium, you'll find out what the new name is.
I need to subscribe.
Yeah. It's another weird little AI agentic thing everyone's going crazy over. And this is what we do now. We are your reporters from whatever stupid stuff people on like AI, Twitter or X are talking about, and you don't want to read firsthand. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into it. It is interesting that it runs on the computer and not in the cloud. And I want to talk about maybe the death of the computer was a little premature.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Anyway, that'll be on the other side of the paywall in Down Round Premium. If you're not a subscriber, unlike the many people who've been subscribing over the past couple of weeks, we're exploding, folks.
Yeah.
Go to downround.net. Join the family.
Yeah, you should definitely join the family. And if this is your first episode, usually we do them in person. This one is being done.
It's remote.
And there may be some remotes chucked in every now and then. Just deal with it. It's fine. I think it's good, actually. But I think next week we might be back to normal. See how we go. Oh, also a mea culpa. That you don't want to miss that. So sign up for a mea culpa.
Mea culpa right up the top.